I like video game music. I like it way more than mainstream music, and I think that's because it's such a flexible genre. Video game music can be literally anything, but still classify as game music because it was in a game. Everybody has different tastes in music, and I know there's some scientific reasoning as to why this is, but I like to think there's a definitive reason I hate a majority of mainstream music. Over the years, I've had to put up with hearing people sing when they can't actually sing. I think, over time, that made me start disliking actual songs, especially since almost all of them have vocals. Even if it was a professional singer, I would genuinely get a bit uncomfortable hearing it. If I'm watching TV and a commercial comes up playing something like, I don't know, Beyoncé in the background, I'm going to wince a bit, then change the channel for a few seconds until the commercial ends. I had been playing video games throughout those years of hearing awful singing, so I guess my brain eventually found comfort in hearing video game music after being tortured with mainstream music for so long. But yeah, there are very few actual songs I like. Hell, if you were to look at the part of my brain that stores music I like, 5% of it would probably be actual music, while the rest is video game music. Obviously, there is a lot of video game music I don't like, but I can tolerate that stuff way more than actual music I dislike. Normies like to say, video game music isn't actually music. To that I say, have you even listened to video game music? Normies either don't play games, or play garbage like FIFA, Madden, or other junk, and I'm pretty sure those games have little to no original music, just boring mainstream stuff. Video game music has evolved over the years. We started out with chiptune, and now we have stuff that could pass as actual music. What's the earliest game to use continuous background music? With enough research, that being a quick Google search, I stumbled upon this Wikipedia page, which says Space Invaders was the first game to have a continuous background track. Some people like to say video game music is just a bunch of beeps and boops. Ironically, this really is just a bunch of beeps and boops, so let's move on to another music track. Space Invaders was released in 1978. This next game, Rally X, developed by Namco, was released in 1980. Aside from that introductory bit, the rest of the music is a very simple loop. It's much more elaborate than the beeping of Space Invaders, though. I'm not really sure where to go from here. I don't want the whole video to be about the history of video game music, so I'll just go over an assortment of game tracks I either like or find interesting. In the Halloween episode of The Angry Video Game Nerd, James plays Halloween for the Atari 2600. When Michael Myers shows up in the game, his music plays. What I'm playing is an isolated track I found on YouTube. The theme in the actual AVGN video has a higher pitch. Anyway, this theme sticks out to me because most Atari games don't even have music. So, it's pretty surprising to hear a version of the Halloween theme on such a primitive piece of technology. Batman on the Commodore 64. This'll probably be the most random track in the video, but since I'm on the topic of the Angry Video Game Nerd, there was an episode about Batman games. In it, the nerd plays Batman the Caped Crusader on the Commodore 64. At one point, he stops talking, giving you a chance to hear the main theme.
Die! What the hell?
For some reason, I thought that part of the theme sounded cool. I guess my brain just liked that sequence of notes, so I wanted to find an isolated version on YouTube. There were a few uploads of the song, but the specific part I was interested in wasn't in them. Instead, it was replaced with the da-na-na-na-na-na-na from the 60s Batman theme. Was the Angry Video Game Nerd just playing an early version of the game with an altered track? Who knows? Speaking of Batman, Batman NES is a great game with great music. I can't go over NES music without mentioning the Super Mario Bros. Theme. It's iconic. This kind of falls into the video game music I don't really like, but it's just so memorable. I think anyone hearing it will know it's from Mario. Castlevania III: Dracula's Curse. The American version of this game has a decent soundtrack. However, if you listen to the Famicom version, you'll notice it's 100 times better. That's because of Konami's VRC6 chip, which allowed for richer audio on NES games. This is Unbreakable Determination from Ninja Gaiden 1 on the NES. It's probably one of the best tracks in the NES library. Nothing to say other than it's great. Does it sound like beeps and boops to you guys? There are lots of other 8-bit games with great soundtracks, but I just wanted to go over a few. I'll move on to 16-bit stuff now. Let's finally talk about some Mega Man music. Mega Man X to be exact. The first Mega Man X had some great music. Mega Man X2 also had great music. Mega Man X3's soundtrack was unfortunately not as good as the previous two, but the intro stage and Zero's theme are spectacular. Sonic 1 has a memorable but boring soundtrack. Sonic 2. Its music is better than Sonic 1's. Sonic 3 and Knuckles has the best classic Sonic soundtrack. To digress for a bit, T-Lopes made some perfect remastered versions of some of these tracks in Sonic Mania. I seem to be covering way too many tracks from each of these 16-bit games. I guess with the slightly more advanced technology, composers were able to cram more than just a couple good tracks into one game. I could cover other games like Super Mario World, Super Metroid, and A Link to the Past, but I don't really find their soundtracks all that remarkable. I think I'll end the 16-bit segment at that. What I want others to understand is, the composers for retro games of the 8 and 16-bit eras were pretty talented. Because you couldn't really store much on a cartridge back then, game music had to be relatively short. The longer you'd play one of these games, the more these tracks would loop and repeat. So, to ensure players wouldn't get fed up hearing a short tune play over and over again, the composers had to create really catchy music, and that can be challenging. Castlevania 3's Aquarius is merely a 37-second loop. Yet, it's so catchy, I'd be fine listening to a 15-minute extension of the theme. And it seems other people feel the same way. This goes for almost all retro game music, and even modern game music to an extent. The fact that there are so many YouTube channels out there dedicated to uploading 15 to 30-minute extensions of game music really shows you how much people love this stuff. Anyway, let's go into a slightly miscellaneous segment for a bit. Street Fighter II. The arcade versions of the original Street Fighter II used what we refer to as the CPS-1 versions of fighter themes. I'll use Ken's theme as an example. When they upgraded to Super Street Fighter II, the music was updated to CPS-2. After that, they added an arranged soundtrack, which was a major step down in my opinion. I like to refer to these as CPS3 tracks. The music isn't awful, I just think a majority of the CPS3 tracks are way too slow-paced to fit in with the fast-paced action of Street Fighter II. I'm not the biggest fan of the Final Fantasy franchise. Turn-based RPGs were always boring to me. That, however, does not mean I can't appreciate the music of these games. You know, even though I've really only played one Final Fantasy game, that being 4 for like an hour on an emulator, I'd have to say 10 is the best one solely because of its music. Also, I remember watching a full playthrough of it on YouTube back in middle school. How about we get into some music with vocals? At the beginning of the video, I said I disliked music with vocals, but there are a few exceptions here and there, especially in the realm of video game soundtracks. Astral Chain, one of the best games on the Nintendo Switch, has a great soundtrack. This track in particular is one of my favorites in the game. Technically, the woman's yelling can be considered vocals, and I think they're pretty appropriate. It makes the track sound so primal. I mean, you're in some weird, uncharted territory fighting savage aliens, not really knowing where you're going, so I think those factors make this a pretty fitting theme. Xenoblade Chronicles X. I'd like to talk about this game one day, but the video would take forever to make considering I have so much to say about it. Besides, I doubt anybody would watch it. For now though, I'll just briefly talk about its music. The entire soundtrack is amazing, but there are a few tracks that kind of suck. There are several tracks with vocals. I believe English and German are the only languages spoken in the songs with lyrics. Sometimes the English stuff can sound a little cringy, but when I'm really in the mood, it sounds great. Here's one of the more obscure tracks in the game that plays during some cutscenes. Those random mouth noises are silly, but I unironically like it. I think it mixes in with the techno-sounding instrumental stuff pretty well. I personally like the German tracks more. What's great is, it's German, but sung by a Japanese person that probably doesn't know the language and was given a sheet of paper with the lyrics written out phonetically.
Done. Now let's see how it looks so far.
Sounds like I'm bashing the music, but trust me, I'm not. This is one of my favorite game soundtracks ever. You can't talk about vocals in video game music without mentioning Sonic. Like Xenoblade X's English music, sometimes I find the vocals in Sonic music cringy, and sometimes I don't. There are only two tracks I always like, no matter what mood I'm in.
You know, every world will have its end. I'm here to prove it all to you. Must have flown away. Will I ever
Marvel vs. Capcom 2 has a great soundtrack. There are some vocals in a couple tracks, but this one in particular has to be my favorite. She's really going at it. What the hell is she even singing about? A whole lot of nothing, but it sounds great nevertheless. Now let's listen to some super immersive music from the other two Xenoblade games. The first Xenoblade has a great soundtrack. Monolith Soft really outdid themselves with the remastered works in Definitive Edition. Now let's listen to some of Xenoblade 2's immersive tracks. Alright, I think that's enough game music for one video. I didn't do any of these compositions justice. You really have to listen to them in their entirety to truly appreciate them, not just hear a quick snippet. So please, I urge you to look up any tracks that may have interested you and listen to the full versions. You know, I don't really remember what the point of this video was, or if it had one to begin with. I guess I just want to say, I like video game music. I like it more than regular mainstream music, and people shouldn't shun it just because it wasn't composed by some trashy-looking celebrities that speak broken English.
When this beat drop, nigga.